The front door opened, but there was nothing on the other side. If you've ever been to a village where people go quiet the second you mention a certain place, you'll know exactly the sort of feeling I mean. Not awkward silence, not the kind where people just don't fancy chatting. I mean the sort of silence that feels like you put your hand on something hot without realizing. Like everybody in the room has suddenly had the same thought at once, and none of them want to be the one to say it out loud. That was Blackridge Fold. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. A small place out on the North Yorkshire moors, maybe a dozen stone cottages, one pub, one closed chapel, and a row of slate roofs, always seeming to sweat under the weather no matter what time of year it was. The sort of village that looks harmless enough in daylight, but even then there's something in the shape of it that makes you slow down. Everything there seemed to lean slightly away from the ridge above it, as if the whole village had spent years bracing itself against whatever stood up there. I went with Callum Haynes at the end of October, just before the weather turned properly vicious. We were both 23, old enough to know better, young enough not to care. I'd known him since secondary school. He was one of those mates you don't need to explain yourself to, the sort you can drive 3 hours with in miserable weather and still not run out of things to say. He grew up in that part of the world, though not in Blackridge itself, and because of that, he carried himself with that easy confidence some people have when they've spent their lives around open country. He was good with directions, good in bad weather, never really shook by much. Me, I wouldn't say I was timid exactly, but I've always been the one more likely to notice when something feels off. The whole idea was mine, which is probably the part that still bothers me. I'd heard about the old lodge above the village from an article online, one of those local history pieces with half the facts missing and the rest buried under ghost story comments from people taking the piss. Blackridge Lodge. Victorian, abandoned, partly burned, left to rot after some dispute over ownership that nobody seemed able to explain clearly. There were 2 blurry photos attached to the article, one taken from the front, showing black stone and broken windows, the other from behind, where the moor dropped away into a line of twisted pines. Even in the photo, that second one looked wrong to me. Too still, too empty. I honestly thought that was why I kept going back to it. Curiosity, more than anything. That stubborn little itch you get when a place looks like it's hiding something. Callum didn't need much convincing. He'd heard of the lodge because his gran used to mention the ridge in that careful way older people sometimes do, where they act as though they're only joking, but their face says otherwise. When I brought it up, he laughed at first and said, "That place? My gran would have a fit if she knew I was taking you there." I thought he was winding me up, but he didn't smile after he said it. He just kept looking out the windscreen as if he'd said more than he meant to. We stopped in the village pub just after 4, more to get warm than anything else. It had already gone dim outside, the sky that flat, dirty gray you only seem to get over the moors. Rain had been following us on and off all afternoon, not proper heavy rain, just a fine drifting damp that got into your clothes and stayed there. Inside the pub, it smelled of old wood, spilled ale, and coal dust from the fire. There were only a handful of people in. A couple of pensioners near the hearth, a woman behind the bar drying glasses, and one bloke in a wax jacket sat by the window with a half-drunk pint. It felt normal for maybe 30 seconds. Then Callum asked the woman behind the bar if the track to Blackridge Lodge was still open. She stopped drying the glass. That was the first thing. Just stopped, mid-motion, and looked at him properly. Not confused, not curious, just weighing him up in a way I didn't like. "Depends what you mean by open," she said. Callum gave this little shrug and said, "Passable then." Nobody else in the pub spoke, but you could feel they were listening. The woman set the glass down. "There's nothing up there." "Old house," I said, trying to sound light. "That's all we're after." Her eyes moved to me, and I swear there was something like pity in them. She said, "That's what most people think." That should have been enough to make me say forget it. In hindsight, it should have been the point where one of us laughed, finished the drink, and drove home. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. Nobody shouted. Nobody told us some dramatic tale. That would have been easier, honestly. What made it worse was how restrained they were. Like they didn't need to convince us because the place would do that on its own. The bloke by the window finally turned round on his stool. He had that washed out look some country people get from years of weather, skin like old paper, and eyes that seemed permanently narrowed against the wind. "If you've come for the house," he said, "don't stop there after dark." I gave a little smile because I didn't know what else to do. "Why's that?" He looked at me for a second too long. "Because people hear things." Callum tried to laugh it off. "What sort of things?" The man's face changed then, only slightly, but enough. "Things that know their name," he said, then turned back to his drink. I remember that sentence more clearly than anything else from that day. Not because it was dramatic, because he said it like it was obvious, like it didn't need dressing up. On the way out, Callum was quieter than he'd been before. We stood under the pub's crooked awning while the rain needled across the road and the ridge loomed above the village, dark even in the remaining daylight. I asked him if he was actually bothered, and he said no straight away, a bit too quickly. Then he added, "My gran used to say odd stuff about that ridge. Nothing definite, just that some places up there don't stay empty." I looked at him. What does that even mean? He shoved his hands in his pockets and gave this half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Means she likes scaring people. But he didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. Not really. We should have noticed then how strange the village felt. No dogs barking, no kids about, no traffic noise except our own car cooling by the curb. Just the wind slipping through the lane and the sound of something metallic knocking faintly in the distance. I remember turning to look up toward the ridge and seeing, for just a second, what I thought was a figure standing beside one of the dry stone walls above the last cottage, too far away to make out properly. Completely still. I blinked and it was gone. Maybe it had never been there. Maybe it was only a gatepost or a branch moving in the weather. But it put this cold little weight in my stomach that I couldn't shake. Callum's gran lived about 10 minutes outside the village in a bungalow with a sagging greenhouse and wind-whitened fence panels. We stopped there before heading up because he wanted to borrow an old lamp and let her know we'd be out overnight somewhere on the moor. Not where exactly, just nearby. I stayed in the kitchen while he spoke to her in the hall, but voices carry in houses like that, and I heard enough. "Not the ridge," she said. He muttered something back. Then, louder, sharp enough to make me look up, she said, "Don't be stupid, Callum. Not that house." He came in a minute later with the lamp and this forced look on his face, like he was pretending the conversation had been nothing. His gran appeared behind him, small woman, silver hair pinned back, cardigan buttoned wrong in the middle as if she dressed in a hurry. She looked straight at me, not him. "If either of you hear someone outside after dark," she said, "you wait until morning." I thought she was joking. I actually nearly smiled. She didn't. "What I mean is," she said, quieter now, "you don't go following voices over open ground. Not there." The room seemed colder after she said it. Properly colder. I remember Callum getting irritated, telling her we were just camping, that we weren't children, that she was making it into something daft. She didn't argue. That was the worst part. She just stepped back and let him pass, then said, "You're old enough to ignore me. That's not the same as being safe." That stayed with me all the way up the track. Even before we reached the lodge, I had the sense that we'd already crossed something. Not physically. Just the feeling that the day had tipped and there was no easy way to put it back. I kept telling myself it was the weather, or the locals, or the usual nerves you get before spending a night somewhere unfamiliar. But deep down, underneath all that, there was another thought I didn't want to admit. The place had unsettled me before I'd even seen it properly. And when that happens, when fear starts before the thing itself arrives, it usually means you're already too late. By the time we left Callum's Grand's place, the light had almost gone completely. Not in a dramatic way either. No sudden darkness, no storm rolling in like something out of a film. It just sort of drained. The sky flattened into this dull, colorless gray, and the ridge above Black Ridge Fold turned into a single dark line that didn't seem to belong to the rest of the landscape anymore. I remember thinking, We've left it a bit late, but neither of us said it out loud. The track up to the lodge wasn't marked. Not properly. It was more like a memory of a road than an actual one. Two faint lines cutting through wet grass and patches of exposed stone. Callum drove slowly, leaning forward over the wheel like he was trying to read the ground ahead of us. The headlights didn't seem to reach very far, just catching bits of heather, broken fence posts, and the occasional glint of water pooling in the dips. It felt longer than it should have. At one point, I checked my phone just out of habit, but there was no signal at all. Not even a flicker. That wasn't unusual for the moors, but it still added something to the silence. You don't realize how much background noise you rely on until it's gone completely. "You still good?" I asked, more to break the quiet than anything else. Callum didn't look at me. "Yeah, course I am." There was a pause. Then he added a bit more quietly, "Just haven't been up this way in years, that's all." That didn't help. The further we went, the less the place looked touched by anything recent. The stone walls grew more uneven, half collapsed in places. Gates hung open or lay flat in the grass as if they'd been pushed over and left. Even the ground felt different under the tires, softer, almost hollow in patches, like there was more water underneath than there should be. And then, about halfway up, we saw the first proper sign that something wasn't right. There was a sheep standing in the middle of the track. Not unusual on its own. You expect livestock out there, but this one didn't move. Didn't even flinch when the headlights hit it. It just stood there, perfectly still, facing slightly away from us, its body angled at an odd, stiff position. Callum slowed the car to a crawl. "Come on," he muttered, giving a small tap on the horn. Nothing. The sheep didn't react. Not a twitch, not a step. Just stood there like it hadn't even noticed us. "Bit slow, that one," I said, trying to keep it light. Callum didn't answer. He edged the car forward a little more, and as we got closer, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten slightly. The animal wasn't grazing, wasn't looking around. Its head was tilted, just slightly too far to one side, like it had been left there mid-motion and forgotten how to move again. "All right, that's weird," I said quietly. Callum leaned forward, squinting. "Yeah." He rolled the car another meter closer. And then, without warning, the sheep turned its head. Not naturally. Not the way you'd expect. It snapped round too fast, too sharply, and for a second the angle looked wrong, like something had forced it rather than it moving on its own. Its eyes caught the headlights. I can't explain it properly, but there was no reflection in them. No shine. Just this dull, flat darkness where there should have been that usual animal glare. Then it bolted, not away from us, sideways, straight off the track and into the dark, disappearing between the low walls in a way that felt more like it had slipped out of sight than actually run. Callum let out a breath through his nose. "Right," he said, forcing a laugh. "That was odd." "Yeah," I said, though I didn't laugh. We sat there for a second longer than necessary before he started driving again. Neither of us mentioned it after that, but something had shifted. You could feel it in the way we stopped talking. In the way Callum kept glancing at the mirrors even though there was nothing behind us for miles. In the way I kept looking out into the dark, half expecting to see movement just beyond where the headlights reached. It wasn't fear yet, not properly. Just that creeping sense that we'd stepped into a place that didn't behave quite the way it should. The lodge came into view all at once. 1 second there was nothing but the slope ahead of us, and the next, it was just there. A dark shape sitting against the ridge like it had been waiting for us to notice it. The stone was blackened in places, just like the photos I'd seen, and the roof had partially collapsed at one end, leaving jagged beams exposed against the sky. Callum pulled the car to a stop about 20 meters away. For a moment, neither of us got out. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled, and the wind moved over the open ground with that low, steady sound you only get in places with nothing to break it. I could feel the cold coming through the doors, even with them shut. "Well," I said eventually, trying to sound normal, "that's it." "Yeah," Callum replied. But he didn't move. I glanced at him. "What?" He shook his head quickly. "Nothing. Just looks worse in person, doesn't it?" He wasn't wrong. There was something about the place that didn't match the rest of the landscape. Not just because it was abandoned, but because it looked used. Not recently. Not obviously. but not completely dead either. The windows were broken, yes, and the door hung slightly open on one hinge, but the ground around it wasn't as overgrown as I expected. There were patches where the grass looked flattened, like something had passed through more than once. What I didn't expect was, I started, then stopped. What? Callum asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. Nothing. Just thought it'd be more gone. Same, he said. We finally got out of the car. The cold hit straight away. Proper biting cold, sharper than it had been down in the village. The kind that makes your ears ache and your fingers stiffen within seconds. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and grabbed my torch from the back seat. The ground felt uneven underfoot as we walked toward the lodge. Not just rough, but slightly soft in places, like the surface wasn't entirely solid. I remember thinking it felt almost like walking over old waterlogged ground. As we got closer, I noticed something hanging above the rear entrance. An iron bell. Small, blackened, fixed to a crooked frame bolted into the stone. It didn't look decorative. It looked functional, like it had been put there for a reason. Bit strange, I said, nodding toward it. Callum followed my gaze. Yeah, don't see why that'd still be there. The wind picked up slightly as he said it. The bell didn't move, not even a faint sound. I stepped closer to the door, pushing it gently with my hand. It creaked inward, slow and heavy, revealing a dark interior that smelled faintly of damp stone and something else, something older, like burnt wood that had soaked into the place and never really left. I glanced back at Callum. Still reckon we stay here? He gave that same half smile again, the one that didn't quite convince me. We didn't come all this way to sleep in the car. That was fair. And honestly, part of me agreed with him. Whatever unease had started creeping in, it still felt manageable, explainable. Just nerves, atmosphere, a few odd details strung together in a place that already had a reputation. But as we stepped inside, boots crunching lightly over debris and dust, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just done something we weren't meant to do. Not because anyone had told us not to, but because the place itself felt like it had been waiting, and now we were in it. Inside, it was colder than outside. That was the first thing that hit me. Not just a drop in temperature, the kind of cold that settles into stone buildings overnight, but something sharper, more immediate. Like stepping into a cellar that hasn't been opened in years. The air felt still, heavy, and faintly damp, carrying that stale smell of old smoke and rotting wood that never quite goes away. I honestly thought it would feel abandoned, but it didn't. That was what put me on edge more than anything else. There's a difference between a place that's been left behind and a place that feels like it's just been paused. Our boots echoed as we moved further in, the sound dull and slightly delayed, like the room was swallowing it before giving it back. The beam of my torch cut through the dark in a narrow cone, picking out broken furniture, collapsed plaster, and patches of blackened wall where fire had clearly taken hold years ago. Bit worse than I expected, Callum muttered, stepping over what looked like part of a fallen door. Yeah, I said, scanning the corners. Definitely not staying upstairs. Didn't plan on it. He said it casually, but I noticed he didn't look toward the staircase when he said it. That staircase sat against the far wall, half intact, the lower steps solid, but the upper section vanishing into shadow where the ceiling had partially given way. It wasn't completely blocked, though. You could still get up there if you wanted to. You just have to ignore the fact that the wood looked warped and brittle, and that the darkness above seemed thicker than it should be. I turned my torch away from it. We moved through what must have been the main room, checking for somewhere relatively clear to set up. The floor was uneven, scattered with debris, but near the center there was a patch where the dust looked thinner. Not clean exactly, just less disturbed. Callum noticed it too. You see that? He said quietly. Yeah. We both stood there for a moment, just looking at it. It wasn't obvious. Not like footprints or anything you could point at and say someone's been here recently. But it didn't match the rest of the room. Everything else was layered in thick dust and bits of plaster, but that patch looked like it had been brushed or walked over, more than once. You reckon someone comes up here? I asked. Callum shrugged, but there was hesitation in it. Maybe. Kids messing about. Or hikers. Up here? I said, glancing back toward the dark outside. In this weather? He didn't answer that. Instead, he moved past it, dropping his bag near the wall. "We'll stay here," he said. "Less chance of anything coming down on us." I nodded, though my attention kept drifting back to that patch on the floor. It wasn't just the way it looked, it was the way it felt, like we'd stepped into someone else's space without realizing. We got ourselves sorted quickly after that. Sleeping bags rolled out, a small lantern lit and set between us, just enough to push back the dark without making the place feel any less enclosed. The shadows clung to the walls anyway, shifting slightly whenever the flame moved, that stretching into corners that the light couldn't quite reach. For a while, everything seemed fine. That's the strange part. We talked, joked a bit, went over the drive, the pub, that sheep on the track. Callum made a point of laughing it off, calling it just a daft animal, but there was something forced about it. I played along anyway. It was easier than letting the quiet settle back in. But then, it did settle. Slowly, without either of us really noticing at first. The wind outside dropped, not gradually, just stopped. 1 second you could hear it moving over the ridge, pushing against the broken walls, slipping through cracks in the stone. The next, there was nothing. No wind, no movement, no sound at all. I remember looking up, frowning slightly. "You hear that?" Callum paused mid-sentence. "What?" "The wind," I said. "It's just gone." He listened for a second, then shrugged. "Probably died down." "Yeah," I said. But it didn't feel like that. When wind dies, there's usually something left behind. A faint rustle, a shift in pressure, something. This felt like someone had just switched it off. We both went quiet after that. Not intentionally. It just happened. The kind of silence that creeps in and makes conversation feel unnecessary, or maybe unwelcome. I found myself listening without meaning to, focusing on the small sounds, the faint crackle of the lantern, the soft shift of fabric when one of us moved, the distant drip of water somewhere deeper in the building. And underneath it all, nothing. No animals, no distant traffic, no wind, just that heavy, empty quiet pressing in from all sides. Callum shifted beside me. "Feels a bit dead, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said a bit too quickly. He gave a short laugh. "Gran would love this. Proper don't go there sort of place." I forced a smile. "Yeah, she'd be thrilled." There was a pause. Then Callum said, more quietly this time, "She said something else before we left." I looked at him. "What?" He hesitated. Then, "She said if we hear someone outside, we wait." My stomach tightened slightly. "Yeah, I heard." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. Didn't like the way she said it. "Mate, she was just trying to scare you," I said, though I didn't sound convinced even to myself. "Old stories, that's all." "Yeah," he said again, but he didn't look up. For a while after that, we didn't talk at all. The lantern flickered slightly, casting long shadows up the walls. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to relax, telling myself it was just the place getting to me. Just isolation. Just the kind of quiet you're not used to unless you've grown up with it. And for a moment, it worked. My body started to settle, the tension easing just enough for my eyes to drift. But then, there was a sound. Faint. So faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I sat up slightly, listening. Nothing. Just the same heavy silence. I let out a breath, shaking my head a little. "You're just on edge," I told myself. "That's all this is." But then it came again. Not louder, just clearer. A soft, dragging noise from somewhere deeper inside the lodge. Callum heard it too. I knew because he went completely still beside me. "You hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said, my voice lower than I intended. We both listened. The sound didn't repeat straight away, which somehow made it worse, because now we were waiting for it. And when it finally came again, it wasn't the same. This time, it wasn't a drag. It was a step, slow, measured, deliberate, coming from somewhere beyond the doorway. Callum's breathing changed. Not loud, but quicker, tighter. "That's not the house settling," he said quietly. "No," I replied. Another step, closer. I felt something cold run down the back of my neck. Every rational part of my brain kicked in at once. Old building, loose debris, animals, wind shifting something inside, but none of it lined up with what we were hearing. Because whatever that was, it sounded careful, like it knew exactly where it was placing its weight. Callum reached slowly for his torch, not taking his eyes off the doorway. "Probably just someone else up here," he said, though his voice had lost most of its confidence. "At this hour?" I asked. He didn't answer. The sound stopped just outside the room, right on the other side of the doorway. We both froze, waiting, listening, and then nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt occupied. Callum swallowed. "All right," he said under his breath, trying to steady himself. "I'm just going to check." "Don't," I started. But he was already moving, slowly, carefully, each step measured as he approached the doorway, torch held out in front of him. I sat up fully now, watching, my pulse starting to climb in a way I couldn't control. He reached the threshold, paused, then leaned slightly forward, angling the torch into the corridor beyond. The beam cut through the dark, revealing cracked walls, scattered debris, nothing out of place. "See anything?" I asked. "No," he said, but he didn't move. He just stood there, looking like he was waiting for something to step into the light. After a few seconds, he let out a slow breath, probably just the place settling. And he said again, though this time it sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than me. "Yeah," I said, but I didn't believe it. And judging by the way he lingered there, neither did he. Because even though we couldn't see anything, it felt like something had been there, right outside, listening, waiting. And for the first time since we'd arrived, I had the very clear, very real thought, we are not alone in this place. Callum stayed in the doorway longer than he needed to. That was the first thing that really got to me. If it had just been a noise, something explainable, he would have checked, come back, shrugged it off, and we'd have carried on pretending everything was normal. That's what we'd been doing all evening. But instead, he stood there with the torch held out in front of him, not moving, not speaking, just staring into the corridor like he was trying to see something that wasn't quite there. "Callum?" I said, a bit sharper than I meant to. "What is it?" He didn't answer straight away. Then, quietly, "I thought I saw someone." That made my stomach drop. "Where?" "Just there," he said, tilting the torch slightly to the left toward a darker section of the wall where the corridor bent out of sight. "Only for a second." "You sure it wasn't just the light?" I asked, already knowing how weak that sounded. "Yeah," he said, too quickly. He stepped back into the room after that, but he didn't sit down. He kept glancing over his shoulder toward the doorway, like he didn't trust it to stay empty. I tried to keep things grounded. "Look, even if someone is up here, it's probably just another group messing about. Same as us." Callum nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "Yeah, probably." There was that word again. Probably. We both knew it wasn't enough. We sat in silence for a bit after that, neither of us quite willing to lie down again. The lantern between us flickered slightly, its light steady but weak, leaving most of the room in shadow. I found myself watching the doorway without meaning to, half expecting something to pass across it. Nothing did. And after a while, the tension eased just enough for us to start talking again. Not properly, just small things, anything to fill the space. But the conversation kept drifting, back to the same point. "What did you think you saw?" I asked eventually. Callum rubbed his face like he was trying to wake himself up. "I don't know, just a shape, like someone leaning round the corner." "A person?" "Yeah, I think." "You think?" He looked at me, frustration creeping in now. "I don't know, all right? It was quick, it didn't look right." "How?" He hesitated, then quieter, too still. That didn't make any sense. "Still?" I repeated. "Yeah," he said, like it wasn't moving properly, not like someone ducking back or stepping away. Just there 1 second, gone the next. I didn't have an answer for that, so I didn't try to give one. Instead, I leaned back against the wall, forcing myself to relax. "All right," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let's just think this through. We've got an old building, loose debris, weird acoustics. It's easy to mishear things, easy to see something that's not really there." Callum gave a short, humorless laugh. "You trying to convince me or yourself?" "Both," I admitted. That got a faint smile out of him. For a moment, things almost felt normal again. Almost. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. And that's exactly when it changed again. The lantern flickered. Not dramatically, just a small dip in the flame, like it had been starved of air for a second. Then it steadied. We both noticed. Neither of us said anything. A few seconds passed. Then it flickered again. Longer this time. The shadows on the walls shifted, stretching unnaturally before snapping back into place. Callum frowned. "Did you feel that?" "Feel what?" "Like pressure," he said, pressing his hand lightly against his chest, like the air just got heavier for a second. I hadn't, Not exactly, but the way he said it made me aware of something I hadn't noticed before. The air did feel thick, not hot, not cold, just dense, like breathing took a little more effort than it should. It's just the place, I said, though my voice had dropped slightly. Old buildings do that. Callum didn't respond. He was looking at the doorway again. I followed his gaze. Still nothing there, but the darkness beyond it seemed deeper now. Not just the absence of light, but something that felt layered, like the corridor extended further than it should, even though we'd already seen its full length. That's stupid, I muttered under my breath. What? Callum asked. Nothing, I said quickly. Just my eyes playing tricks. He nodded slowly, but he didn't look away, and then, very quietly, he said, Do you hear that? I held my breath, listened. At first, nothing. Something. Faint, so faint I almost missed it, a sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps this time, not movement, something softer, lower, like a voice. I sat up straight. What is that? Callum's face had gone pale. That's it, he whispered. My stomach tightened. What do you mean that's it? That's what I heard earlier, he said, barely louder than the sound itself. In the night, back home, sometimes. I thought it was next door, I don't know. What does it sound like? He didn't answer straight away. The sound came again, clearer now, still too quiet to make out words, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, speaking or whispering, somewhere in the building, not outside, inside. I felt my chest tighten slightly. All right, I said, trying to keep control of my voice. That's definitely someone else. It has to be. Yeah, Callum said, but he didn't sound relieved. If anything, he sounded worse. The voice continued, soft, measured, almost conversational, like someone speaking to themselves or to someone just out of earshot. What I didn't expect was, I started, then stopped again, because the more I listened, the more something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the volume, it was the way it carried. The sound didn't seem to come from a single direction. It felt like it was moving, not physically, not like footsteps, but like it was slipping between spaces. One second it seemed to be further down the corridor, the next it felt closer. Then it was behind us, then gone again. That's not right, I said quietly. Callum shook his head, his eyes wide now. No, it's not. The voice stopped, abruptly, cut off mid-sound. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing in, waiting. We both stared at each other. Neither of us wanted to say it, but it was there, hanging between us. That wasn't just someone else in the building. That was something we didn't understand. Callum swallowed hard. We should probably just ignore it, he said, though there was no confidence left in his voice now. If it's someone messing about, they'll get bored. Yeah, I said, but I didn't believe that, not even a little, because deep down something had already shifted. Before, we'd been dealing with possibilities, with explanations, with things that could be rationalized. Now, we had something else, something that didn't behave like a person, something that didn't move like a person, something that spoke but didn't seem to belong to any one place. I leaned back slowly, forcing myself to stay calm, forcing my breathing to even out. You're overthinking it, I told myself. There's a logical explanation. There has to be. But even as I thought it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd misunderstood the warning completely. It wasn't about seeing something. It wasn't even about being followed. It was about listening. And the moment that thought settled in my head, I realized something else. The voice hadn't come back, not because it had left, but because it was waiting for one of us to respond. Neither of us said anything for a while after that. We just sat there, listening, waiting for the voice to come back. It didn't. And somehow that made it worse, because now it felt deliberate, like whatever had been making that sound had chosen to stop. Not faded out, not wandered off, just stopped, as if it knew we were paying attention. Callum let out a slow breath, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them up. Right, he said, forcing some steadiness back into his voice. We're not just sitting here all night, are we? What do you mean? I asked. He glanced toward the doorway again. If there's someone else in here, I'd rather know, not just wait for them to come to us. That made sense, logically at least, and part of me agreed with him. Sitting still, listening to something we didn't understand, it felt like giving up control, like letting whatever was out there decide what happened next. But another part of me didn't want to move at all. Didn't want to step out into that corridor. Didn't want to find out what we'd hear if we got closer. All right, I said finally, even though my chest had tightened slightly. Quick look, then we come straight back. Callum nodded. Yeah, quick. He grabbed his torch again and I did the same. The lantern stayed where it was, casting that weak, flickering glow across the room as we stepped toward the doorway. The moment we crossed into the corridor, the air changed. It felt colder. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Enough to make the skin on my arms tighten under my sleeves. The beam of my torch swept across the walls, picking out cracked plaster, dark stains, and patches where the stone showed through beneath. Everything looked exactly the same as it had a few minutes earlier, except now it felt different, occupied. Callum moved ahead slightly, his light cutting further down the corridor toward the bend. Hello? He called out, his voice echoing faintly. No response. Anyone in here? He tried again. Nothing. Just that same thick silence. We moved slowly, step by step, our boots crunching lightly over debris. The sound seemed too loud in the narrow space, each movement exaggerated, like the building was amplifying it. As we reached the bend, I felt it again. That pressure. Subtle, but there, like the air was pushing back slightly as we moved through it. Callum paused, his torch angled toward the darker section ahead. You feel that? He asked. Yeah, I said quietly. Neither of us needed to explain it. We turned the corner together. The corridor opened into a wider space that must have once been some sort of secondary room or storage area. Most of the ceiling here had collapsed, leaving jagged beams exposed and a section open to the sky above. Faint gray light filtered down through it, mixing with the torch beams and giving everything a strange, uneven glow. At first glance, it looked empty, just more debris, more broken wood, more dust. But then I noticed something. Callum, I said, lowering my voice. He followed my gaze. The floor, near the center of the room. It wasn't like the rest. The boards there looked wrong, warped slightly upward like something beneath them had pushed against the wood over time. The dust around that area was thinner, disturbed in a way that didn't match the rest of the room. Same as the other one, Callum said. Yeah. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving. There was no reason to go closer, no reason to get involved. We could have turned around right then, gone back to the main room, packed up, left. But curiosity has a way of overriding common sense, especially when you're already halfway into something you shouldn't be. What do you reckon? Callum asked. I hesitated. Then, only one way to find out. Even as I said it, I knew it was a mistake. We stepped forward carefully, the boards creaking softly under our weight. Up close, the warped section was more obvious. One plank sat slightly higher than the others, its edge split, the wood darkened as if it had been exposed to moisture for a long time. Callum crouched down, running his hand along the edge. Loose, he said. Probably collapsed underneath, I replied. Maybe. He shifted his grip, testing the plank. It moved, just slightly, but enough. Give me a hand, he said. I crouched beside him, gripping the other end. The wood felt cold and damp under my fingers, rough with age. We exchanged a quick look, one of those unspoken ready moments, and then pulled. At first, it resisted. Then, with a dull cracking sound, it gave way. The plank lifted, and a breath of air came up from beneath it. Cold, stale, wrong. I recoiled slightly without thinking. Did you feel that? Callum nodded slowly, his face tightening. Yeah. We held our torches over the gap. There was a space beneath the floor, not large, not deep, just enough to create a narrow crawl space between the boards and the ground below. But it wasn't empty. That was the first thing I noticed. There were things down there. Objects, old ones, half buried in dust and debris. Looks like storage, I said, though I wasn't convinced. Callum shifted the plank further aside, widening the opening. Doesn't look like normal storage. He wasn't wrong. The items weren't arranged. They weren't stacked or stored neatly. They looked shoved, like someone had hidden them there in a hurry. I leaned in slightly, angling my torch to get a better look. The beam passed over a rusted kettle, its handle bent at an odd angle. Beside it, something that looked like a bundle of cloth, darkened and stiff with age. A small wooden box, cracked open, its contents scattered. And then, something else. A photograph, half buried under dust. I reached down instinctively, brushing some of the dirt away. The image was faded, the edges curled and brittle. It showed a small group of people standing outside the lodge, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. A family, maybe. Their faces were blurred by time, but there was something about the way they stood, close together, slightly stiff, that made it feel more like a posed record than a casual moment. "What's that?" Callum asked. "Old photo," I said, turning it slightly to catch the light. But as I did, I noticed something else. The surface wasn't just faded, it was damaged, burnt. The edges blackened, the center warped slightly as if it had been exposed to heat. "Fire damage," Callum said, leaning closer. "Yeah." I turned it over. There was writing on the back, faint, scratched in rather than written properly. It took a second to make it out. Then, "Don't," I started, my voice trailing off. "What?" Callum asked. I swallowed, reading it again to be sure. "Don't answer her when she is close," I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us. Neither of us spoke, neither of us moved. Because suddenly, everything we'd heard, everything we'd felt, it shifted. Before, it had been uncertainty. Now, it felt like a warning. Callum let out a slow breath, his voice tight. That's not normal, is it?" "No," I said. "No, it's not." I placed the photo back carefully, my hand unsteady despite myself. And as I did, I noticed something else, something carved into the wood beneath the floorboards. Faint, but deliberate. I angled my torch closer. There it was again. The same message, repeated, over and over, scratched into the beam with something sharp. "Don't answer her! Don't answer her! Don't answer her!" My chest tightened. What I didn't expect was, I muttered under my breath, not even finishing the thought, because I didn't need to. We both understood now. The voice we'd heard, it wasn't random, it wasn't harmless. And whatever it was, it had been here before, waiting, long before we ever stepped inside. Callum stood up slowly, backing away from the opening. "We should go," he said. "Yeah," I replied immediately. For the first time since we'd arrived, there was no hesitation, no curiosity, no need to prove anything, just a clear, instinctive understanding. We had made a mistake, and we needed to leave. But as we turned toward the corridor, the voice came back, soft, clear, right behind us. "Callum," we froze. Every muscle in my body locked in place, because this time, it wasn't distant, it wasn't unclear, it wasn't just a sound, it was a name. And it had spoken it perfectly. Neither of us turned around, not straight away. That's the thing people don't really talk about. You always think in that sort of moment you'd react instantly. Spin round, shine a torch, demand to know who's there. But when something calls your name like that, perfectly, quietly, from right behind you, your body doesn't move. It locks. Because somewhere deep down, you already know you're not going to like what you see. Callum's breathing had gone shallow beside me. I could hear it, quick and uneven, like he was trying to keep it under control and failing. "Did you?" he started. "Yeah," I said, barely above a whisper. Another pause. Neither of us spoke the obvious question, because we both knew the answer. There had been no one standing behind us. We would have heard them, seen them. There was nowhere for anyone to hide in that space without us noticing. And yet, the voice had been right there, close enough to feel. Callum swallowed hard. "Don't turn round," he said under his breath. "I wasn't planning to," I replied. That wasn't entirely true. Part of me wanted to look, not out of bravery, more out of this horrible, creeping curiosity. The same instinct that had made us pull up those boards, the same thing that had brought us here in the first place. But something stronger held me still. That warning. Don't answer her when she is close. And right then she was close. We moved at the same time, slowly, carefully, stepping away from the opening in the floor without turning our backs completely. My torch shook slightly in my hand as I kept it angled toward the ground, not daring to sweep it behind us. Another step, then another. The silence pressed in again, thick and heavy. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, that had been it, that whatever it was had only needed to say his name, that it would leave us alone now. Then, Callum. This time it came from the corridor, further away, but still clear, still calm. And worse, it sounded different, not louder, not distorted, just closer to normal, more human. Callum's head snapped slightly toward the doorway, his body tensing like he'd been pulled by something invisible. "That's," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "That's not?" "I know," I said quickly. Just don't. Because I could see it happening, the shift, the way his posture changed, the way his attention locked onto the sound. Like something in him recognized it, responded to it, and for a split second, I had this horrible thought that if he answered, if he spoke back, something would change, something we wouldn't be able to undo. "Callum," I said, sharper now, "look at me." He didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on the corridor. The voice came again, soft, patient. "Callum, come here." That was new. My stomach dropped, because now it wasn't just calling, it was directing, telling him where to go. And the worst part, it sounded right. Not in a comforting way, but in a familiar way, like someone he should recognize. "Who does that sound like?" I asked quickly. Callum didn't answer, but I saw it in his face, the hesitation, the confusion, the almost recognition. "Callum," I said again, louder this time. "Who does it sound like?" He blinked like he was snapping out of something. "I don't know," he said, but his voice didn't convince me. "Just someone." Another whisper, closer now. "Callum." He took a step forward. Just one. But that was enough. I grabbed his arm immediately, gripping it tighter than I meant to. "No, no, you're not going anywhere." He pulled slightly against me, not aggressively, just instinctively, like he hadn't even realized he'd moved. "It's just someone," he said, though it sounded like he was trying to convince himself again. "They might need help." "In here?" I snapped. "In the middle of nowhere? After everything we've just... No, absolutely not." The voice didn't come again, but the silence that followed felt expectant, like it was waiting to see what we'd do next. Callum stood there for a second longer, then slowly stepped back, breaking whatever hold had started to take hold of him. "Yeah," he said, more firmly now. "Yeah, you're right." I didn't let go of his arm straight away, not until I was sure he wasn't going to move again. "We're leaving," I said. No hesitation this time. No debate. He nodded. "Yeah, now." We moved quickly after that, back through the corridor, into the main room, grabbing our things without bothering to pack properly. The lantern was still burning, the flame steady now, like nothing had happened, like the building itself hadn't just whispered his name from behind us. I shut it off without thinking, plunging the room into near total darkness apart from our torches. "Outside," I said. Callum didn't argue. We headed straight for the door. The moment we stepped out onto the open ground, the air changed again, not warmer, but lighter, like whatever pressure had been building inside the lodge had been left behind with it. I took a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Right," I said, trying to steady myself. "We get in the car. We go. That's it." "Yeah," Callum said, but he didn't move toward the car. He was looking past it toward the back of the lodge. I followed his gaze. There was a narrow path there, barely visible, just a slight break in the grass, leading away from the building toward a cluster of low, twisted trees further up the slope. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I had and just hadn't paid attention. But now, it stood out, like it was meant to. "Did we come up that way?" I asked. Callum shook his head slowly. "No." We both stood there, staring at it, neither of us speaking, because even without saying it, we both knew that was the direction the voice had come from. And before I could stop myself, before I could think better of it, I said, "That's where it is." Callum didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. The wind picked up slightly then, brushing over the ridge with a low, distant sound. And for a moment, everything seemed normal again. Just the moor, just the cold, just the two of us standing outside an abandoned building. But then, from somewhere beyond those trees, the voice came again, faint, almost carried on the wind. "Come here." Callum took a step toward the path. I grabbed his arm again, harder this time. "No." He hesitated, just for a second, then slowly, reluctantly stepped back. "We're leaving," I said again. He nodded. But even as we turned toward the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were making the wrong decision. Not because we should go toward it, but because it didn't feel like something that would let us leave that easily. And as I reached for the car door, I heard it again. Not from the trees, not from the lodge, but from somewhere much closer, right behind us. Soft, almost patient. "You shouldn't go that way." I froze, because this time, it wasn't calling him, it was speaking to both of us, and it sounded certain. I didn't turn around. Not this time. I couldn't. Because that voice, whatever it was, it hadn't sounded like it was trying to lure us anymore. It sounded like it was correcting us, like we'd misunderstood something. My hand was still on the car door handle, but I hadn't opened it. I just stood there, frozen, feeling the cold metal under my fingers and trying to steady my breathing. Callum hadn't moved either. "Did you hear?" he started. Yeah, I said quickly. Don't, don't react to it. But even as I said that, I realized something. It hadn't said his name. Not this time. It had said you, both of us. That changed things. Before it had felt focused on him, targeting him, pulling at him specifically. Now it felt aware of both of us, watching both of us. The wind dropped again, just like it had inside. Too suddenly, too completely. The moor went quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. No rustling grass, no distant movement. Even the faint creak of the lodge behind us seemed to vanish. I slowly let go of the door handle. Get in the car, I said under my breath. Callum didn't respond. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him out of the corner of my eye. He was still facing the path, still staring toward those trees. Callum, I said more firmly. He blinked like he'd been pulled out of something again. Yeah, sorry. He reached for the passenger door. That's when the bell rang. Soft, clear, right behind us. I flinched, my whole body tightening as the sound cut through the silence. We both turned instinctively. The iron bell above the lodge door swayed slightly on its frame, just enough to move. But there was no wind, nothing touching it, no reason for it to be moving at all. It gave one more faint knock, then went still. Callum stared at it. That wasn't there before, was it? It was, I said, though my voice felt distant. But it didn't move. Another pause. Neither of us looked away from it, because now it felt like part of it. Not decoration, not left over from the building's past. Something else, something that reacted or announced or warned. I don't like this, Callum muttered. Get in the car, I said again, sharper this time. He nodded quickly and opened the door, climbing in without another word. I followed a second later, shutting my door harder than I meant to. The sound echoed too loudly in the stillness, making me flinch again. For a second, neither of us moved, just sat there, breathing, listening, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Right, I said, forcing myself to focus. We go. Now. Callum nodded and reached for the ignition. The engine turned, then stopped. He frowned. Hang on. He tried again. The engine turned over, then cut out again. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Don't mess about, I said. Just start it. I am, he snapped, a bit more sharply than usual. It's not catching. He turned the key again. Same result. The engine tried, then died. Silence flooded back in immediately after, too quickly, like the car had been the only thing breaking it. Callum swore under his breath. That's not right. It was fine on the way up. Try again. He did. Same thing. Each failed attempt seemed to make the quiet outside feel heavier, closer, like the space around the car was tightening. I glanced out of the window. The lodge stood there, dark and still. The path behind it barely visible in the dim light. The trees beyond that looked like shadows more than anything solid. And for a moment, I thought I saw something move between them. Just a shape, gone before I could focus on it. Did you see that? I asked quickly. See what? Nothing, I said, though my voice had dropped again, because I wasn't sure. And I didn't want to make it worse. Callum ran a hand through his hair, clearly rattled now. All right, stay calm. It's probably just damp, cold start. Give it a second. Yeah, I said. But I wasn't thinking about the engine. I was thinking about the bell, about the voice, about the way everything seemed to happen in steps, like it was building, testing. And then, from outside, a sound. Not the voice, something else. A soft movement in the grass. Close. Too close. I turned my head slowly toward the driver's side window. Callum followed my gaze. Neither of us spoke, because we both heard it. Something was moving, circling the car. Not fast, not loud, just enough to let us know it was there. Don't open anything, I said immediately. I'm not going to, Callum replied, his voice tight. The movement stopped, right beside his door. We both stared at the window. The glass reflected our own faces faintly in the dim light, making it harder to see beyond. For a second, nothing. Then, a shadow passed across the glass, slow, deliberate. Not shaped clearly enough to be a person, but not random either. Callum's breath caught slightly. That's not someone messing about. No, I said quietly, because it wasn't. There was no sense of another human presence, no footsteps, no weight, just that movement, like something passing through the space rather than walking in it. The shadow stopped, right outside his door. Neither of us moved, didn't breathe, didn't speak, and then, very softly, right beside his ear, the voice again. Callum? He flinched violently this time, jerking away from the door. No, that's... Don't answer it, I snapped immediately. Don't even react. But it was getting harder, because now it wasn't distant. It wasn't in the building. It wasn't coming from the trees. It was right there, close enough to feel, close enough to hear every detail. And there was something else about it now, something worse. It sounded clearer, more confident, like it didn't need to hide anymore. Callum shook his head, pressing his back against the seat. That's not a person, he said, almost to himself. I know. The voice came again, but this time it changed, but unmistakable. It sounded closer to someone we knew. Not exactly, not enough to name, but enough to feel wrong in a different way. Like it was trying something, testing. Callum opened the door. His hand twitched slightly toward the handle. I grabbed his wrist instantly. No. He looked at me, his face pale now. It sounds like... I don't care what it sounds like, I cut in. It's not. That seemed to snap something in him. He pulled his hand back, nodding quickly. Yeah, you're right. The engine clicked faintly as it cooled. The only sound inside the car. Outside, nothing. The voice didn't come again. The shadow didn't move. Everything just stopped. But it didn't feel over. It felt like it was waiting, watching. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized something properly. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a place with a strange history. This was something that reacted, adapted, learned. And right now, it was figuring us out. And the longer we stayed, the easier that would become. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then Callum tried the ignition again. This time, the engine started. Clean, immediate, no hesitation. The sudden sound made both of us flinch, like we'd been expecting silence forever. Callum didn't waste a second. He shoved the gear into reverse and pulled us back hard, the tires slipping slightly on the soft ground before catching. Go, I said, even though he already was. We didn't look back at first, didn't want to. The headlights swung across the lodge as we turned, briefly lighting up the blackened stone and broken windows. For just a moment, I thought I saw something standing in one of those openings on the upper level, tall, unmoving. But the car jolted over a rut and the angle shifted, and it was gone. Don't stop, I said. I'm not planning to, Callum replied. We followed the same faint track back down the ridge, the car bouncing over uneven ground, the headlights barely holding the road together in front of us. Everything felt tighter now. The space outside the car didn't feel open anymore. It felt close, pressed in. I kept checking the mirrors. I don't know why. There was nothing to see, just darkness. But every time I looked, I had this feeling, like something should be there. Following, not fast, not chasing, just keeping pace. You all right? Callum asked, not taking his eyes off the track. Yeah, I said automatically. Then, after a second, just don't slow down. I'm not, he said again. We drove like that for what felt like ages, but in reality it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes before the track widened slightly and the shape of the lower field started to come into view. And just like that, it was gone. The pressure, the silence, the feeling of being watched. It didn't fade. It dropped, like stepping out of a room. Callum slowed the car slightly without meaning to, then caught himself and sped up again. You feel that? He asked. Yeah, I said. Neither of us explained it. We didn't need to. We'd left something behind, or it had stopped following. We didn't stop in the village, didn't even look toward it as we passed. Just kept driving until we were well clear of the area, until the roads felt normal again, until there were other cars, other lights, anything that made the world feel like it had people in it again. Only then did Callum finally pull over. We sat there in silence for a moment, the engine idling softly. Then he killed it. The quiet that followed felt normal, for the first time in hours. Callum leaned forward, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. What the hell was that? I didn't answer straight away, because I didn't have one. I don't know, I said eventually. That wasn't someone in the building, was it? No, I said. Too quickly, too certain, because whatever that had been, it hadn't felt like another person. Callum sat back slowly, staring ahead. It knew my name. Yeah. And it sounded, he hesitated, frowning slightly. It sounded like someone I should know. That made my chest tighten again. Who? I asked. I don't know, he said, shaking his head. That's the thing. It was close, but not right. Like it was guessing. Neither of us spoke after that, because that made too much sense, and it made everything worse. We stayed there for a while, just letting the tension drain out of us, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, we agreed to head back to his place rather than mine. It was closer, and neither of us really wanted to be alone. The drive after that was quiet, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Like we were both thinking the same things but didn't want to say them out loud. When we got to his house, everything felt normal again. Lights on, warm air, the familiar creak of the floorboards as we stepped inside. It should have been enough. It should have reset everything. But it didn't, because the moment the door shut behind us, Callum paused, just inside the hallway. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer straight away. He was listening. I felt it too, that instinctive shift, the same one from the lodge, from the car, the sense that something wasn't quite right. "Do you hear that?" he said quietly. My stomach dropped, because I didn't want to. I really didn't want to, but I listened anyway. At first, nothing, just the usual sounds of a house settling. Then, faint. So faint I almost dismissed it. A sound, not from outside, not from another room, from upstairs, a slow, deliberate step. I stared at him. "No," he nodded slowly, his face tightening. "Yeah." Another step, soft, measured, exactly like before. My chest tightened. "That's not possible." "It followed us," he said. "No," I said immediately. "No, it didn't. It can't." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Because that sound, it was the same. Not similar, not close, the same. Another step. Then silence. Callum didn't move, neither did I. We just stood there in the hallway, staring at the staircase like it might suddenly explain itself. "What do we do?" he asked. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Because every instinct I had was telling me the same thing. Don't go up there. Don't check. Don't respond. But at the same time, we couldn't just stand there. "All right," I said finally, forcing some steadiness into my voice. "We check. Together. Quick. Then we leave if something's wrong." Callum nodded. But I could see it in his face. He didn't want to. Neither did I. We moved slowly toward the stairs. Each step creaked under our weight, the sound too loud in the quiet house. The air felt normal, warm, still, but the tension was back. Not as strong as at the lodge, but there, waiting. We reached the top. The landing was empty. Nothing out of place. No movement. No sound. Callum let out a shaky breath. "See? It's just..." The bedroom door at the end of the hall creaked open, on its own, slowly, just a few inches, then stopped. We both froze. Neither of us spoke, because we both saw it, and there was no way to explain it. "What I didn't expect was," I whispered, not finishing the thought, because I didn't need to. We both understood. Whatever had been at that lodge, whatever had called his name, it hadn't stayed there. And now it knew where we lived. We didn't move, not straight away. The door at the end of the landing stayed exactly where it was, slightly open, just enough to show a strip of darkness inside. No further movement, no sound, just that small, deliberate change, like something had reached out and tested the space. Callum let out a slow breath beside me. That didn't just happen." "It did," I said quietly, because denying it wasn't helping anymore. Not now. Not after everything we'd already seen. The house felt different. It's hard to explain, but it wasn't just fear. It was the sense that something had shifted. Like the space we were standing in wasn't entirely ours anymore. Like something had been introduced into it. Something that didn't belong, but wasn't leaving either. "Stay here," Callum said suddenly. I looked at him. "No chance. I just want to check the room." "We check it together," I cut in. "Or we don't check it at all." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, together." We moved forward slowly, side by side, both of us watching that door like it might slam shut or swing wide open at any second. The floorboards creaked under each step, the sound sharper than usual, like the house itself was amplifying everything we did. Halfway down the landing, I felt it again. That pressure, subtle, but there, like the air ahead of us was slightly thicker than it should be. "You feel that?" I asked under my breath. Callum didn't look at me. "Yeah?" We didn't stop, didn't want to. Stopping felt worse. The closer we got to the door, the colder it became. Not freezing, just enough to notice, enough to make the skin on my hands tighten slightly. We reached the door. Callum paused, his hand hovering just in front of it. For a second, I thought he wasn't going to touch it. Then he pushed, slowly. The door creaked open further, revealing the room inside. Nothing, at first glance, just his bedroom. Bed against the far wall. Wardrobe to the left. Desk by the window. Everything exactly where it should be. "See?" I said. though my voice lacked conviction. Nothing there. Callum didn't answer. He stepped inside cautiously, sweeping his torch across the room even though the ceiling light was already on. I followed, staying close to the doorway, not wanting to go too far in. Everything looked normal. Too normal. That was the problem. After what we just experienced, it shouldn't have felt like this. It should have felt wrong. But instead, it felt quiet, too quiet. Callum walked further in, checking behind the door, glancing under the bed, opening the wardrobe. Nothing, he said finally, though he didn't sound relieved. Yeah, I replied, but I didn't move. I was still standing near the door, because something didn't feel right, not in the room, behind me. I turned slowly, back toward the landing, empty, exactly as we'd left it. But something about it felt off, like the space itself had changed slightly, like it was deeper than it should be. Callum, I said quietly. What? Just look at the hallway. He stepped back beside me, following my gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke, because we both saw it. The landing looked longer, not obviously, not in a way you could point at and say that's wrong, but the far end, the staircase, it felt further away, like the distance had stretched slightly. That wasn't like that before, Callum said under his breath. No, I said, no, it wasn't. We stood there, staring, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Then, a sound from downstairs, a soft click, like something had just shifted or closed. Callum stiffened. Front door? I felt my stomach tighten. We locked it, didn't we? Yeah, another sound. This time, a step, slow, measured, exactly like before, coming from below. Callum looked at me. No. Yeah, I said quietly, because there was no denying it now. It wasn't just here. It was moving, through the house. Another step, closer, from the bottom of the stairs. We both backed up slightly without thinking, putting a bit more distance between ourselves and the landing. All right, Callum said, his voice tight. We leave, now. No argument, I replied. We moved quickly toward the stairs, but as we stepped out onto the landing, the sound stopped completely. No more footsteps, no movement, just silence again. The same heavy silence from the lodge. Callum paused at the top of the stairs. You go first, he said. Why me? Because if something's there, I don't want you behind me, he replied. That made sense, in a strange way. I swallowed, then nodded. Right. I stepped forward carefully, placing my foot on the first step. It creaked, too loud, echoing down into the darkness below. I froze, listening. Nothing, no reaction, no movement, just that same silence. I took another step, then another. Callum stayed close behind me. We moved slowly, every movement deliberate, every sound feeling like it carried too far. Halfway down, I felt it again. That pressure, stronger this time, like something was directly below us, waiting. I stopped. Callum bumped lightly into me from behind. Why have you stopped? Do you feel that? I whispered. He didn't answer, but I felt his hand tighten slightly on my shoulder. That was enough. Another step, closer to the bottom. The hallway below was dark now. The light we left on earlier, gone. Did you turn that off? I asked. No, Callum said immediately. Neither did I. We reached the bottom step and stopped, because standing there at the end of the hallway was not clearly, not fully, but enough. A shape, darker than the dark around it, still, watching. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What is that? Callum whispered. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. And because as we stood there, it moved. Not forward, not toward us, just shifted, slightly, like it had adjusted its stance, or like it had noticed us properly. And then soft, clear. From the darkness, Callum. He flinched hard beside me. No, he said immediately. Don't respond, I snapped. But it was harder now, because it wasn't just a voice anymore. It was attached to something, something standing in our house, something that shouldn't be there. The shape didn't move again, didn't come closer. But it didn't leave either. It just stood there, at the end of the hall, waiting, like it knew we had nowhere else to go. We didn't go any further, not toward it, not at first, because standing there on that last step, looking into the hallway, it became very clear this wasn't something we could just walk past. Not like a person, not like someone you could confront, push aside, or demand answers from. That shape at the end of the hall, it wasn't blocking the way, it was holding it, like it had chosen that exact position for a reason. Callum's hand tightened on my shoulder. We're not going down there, he said under his breath. I nodded. No. But we didn't go back up either. We just stood there, caught between two choices that both felt wrong. The thing at the end of the hall didn't move, didn't come closer, didn't retreat. It just stood there, darker than the space around it, like the light itself didn't quite reach it properly. The more I looked at it, the harder it became to define its shape. It wasn't solid, not completely. The edges seemed to blur slightly, like it wasn't entirely fixed in one place, and yet it was there, watching us. I could feel it, not in a dramatic way, not like heat or cold, just a constant awareness, like being stared at for too long. "Callum," it said again, softer this time, almost patient. He flinched beside me. "That's not right," he whispered. That's not how it sounded before." I knew what he meant. Before, the voice had been separate, unattached. Now, it belonged to something standing right in front of us. "Don't answer it," I said again, quieter now. "I'm not going to," he replied, but his voice wavered, because it wasn't just saying his name anymore. There was something else in it, something familiar. I saw it in his face, that hesitation, that flicker of recognition. "Who does it sound like?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He didn't respond straight away. Then, barely audible, It's close to my mom." That hit harder than anything else, because now it made sense, the way it shifted, the way it adapted, the way it sounded almost right, but not quite, like it was copying, learning, testing different voices until it found one that worked. "That's not her," I said firmly. "You know that's not her." "I know," he said quickly, but his eyes stayed fixed on it. And that was the problem. The shape shifted again, not stepping forward, just adjusting, like it was reacting to the conversation. Then it spoke again, clearer, closer. "Callum, come here." His breath hitched. I felt it, even before he moved. His weight shifted slightly forward. Instinct, reaction, like something inside him was answering before he could stop it. I grabbed his arm immediately. No, he didn't pull away this time, but he didn't look at me either. "It sounds like her," he said, his voice strained. "It's just something's off. I just can't figure out what." "Because it's not her," I said. "It's trying to sound like her." Another pause. The shape tilted slightly, like a head angling to one side, watching, listening. Then, "Callum, you left me." The words landed differently. Not a command, not a lure. Something else, something heavier. I saw it hit him. His expression changed instantly, confusion, then something closer to guilt. "That's not," he started, but his voice faltered. "Don't listen to it," I said quickly, but it was getting harder, because whatever this was, it wasn't just calling anymore. It was targeting, picking at something, trying different approaches, and it was getting better at it. The air in the hallway felt thicker now, heavier, like the space itself was tightening around us. "Callum," it said again. This time, it took a step forward, a small one, but enough. The shape shifted slightly closer into the dim light, and for a split second, I saw more of it. Not clearly, not enough to fully understand what I was looking at, but enough to know it wasn't right. The proportions were off, too tall, too narrow. The edges of it didn't line up with how a person should stand, and the way it moved, there was no weight to it, no proper motion, just a repositioning, like something being placed rather than stepping. Callum sucked in a sharp breath. "That's not." "No," I said immediately. "It's not." But he didn't step back, not yet. And that was when I realized he wasn't fully in control anymore. Not completely. He was resisting, but something was pulling at him, quietly, steadily. "Callum, look at me," I said. He didn't. His eyes stayed locked on it. The voice came again, softer now, more convincing. "Come here." He took a step, didn't hesitate. I grabbed him by the shoulder, pulled him back hard, and when he resisted, I hit him. Not full force, not enough to hurt him badly, but enough. Enough to break whatever that moment was. He stumbled slightly, blinking rapidly, his focus snapping back to me. "What the?" "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't listen to it. Don't even look at it." He shook his head, like he was trying to clear it. "I don't know what just—" "I do," I cut in. "It's trying to pull you in." That's what the shape didn't move, but I could feel it. That shift in attention, like it had noticed what I'd done, like I'd interrupted something. The voice came again. But this time, it wasn't soft, it wasn't patient. It was sharper, more direct. "You shouldn't have done that." The words hit differently, not just directed at Callum, at me. My grip tightened on his arm. "Right," I said, forcing myself to stay steady. "We're not staying here." "No argument," he said quickly. Good. That meant he was still thinking, still present. We backed up slowly toward the stairs again, not turning our backs on it, not giving it that, step by step, keeping distance. The shape didn't follow, didn't advance, but it didn't leave either. It just stood there, watching. And as we reached the bottom of the stairs again, it spoke one last time, calm, certain. You can't leave the same way. That sent a chill straight through me, because something about that felt true. Not like a threat, like a statement. And for the first time since we'd stepped into that house, I realized something properly. We weren't just dealing with something that could follow us. We were dealing with something that could change things. Paths, space, distance. And if that was true, then getting out of this house might not be as simple as walking through the front door. We didn't run, not straight away. That's what your body wants to do, obviously. Panic, bolt, get as far away as possible. But something about what it had just said, you can't leave the same way, that stuck. Because it didn't feel like a bluff, it felt like a rule. Callum looked at me, his face pale, eyes clearer now, but still shaken. What does that even mean? I don't know, I said, but we're not testing it. We moved anyway, backwards at first, keeping that shape in view as we edged along the hallway, then turning once we reached the base of the stairs and heading straight for the front door. It was exactly where it should be. Same place, same frame, same faint strip of cold air leaking in around the edges. For a split second, relief hit me. It's just a door. We're overthinking it. I reached for the handle, pulled it open, and stepped out into darkness. Not outside, not the front path. Darkness, complete, flat, wrong. I stopped dead. Callum nearly walked into me from behind. Whyview? Then he saw it too. That's not right, he said quietly. Because it wasn't. There should have been the front garden, the short path, the road just beyond. Instead, there was nothing. Just black, not even night. Night has depth, has shapes, has something. This had none. It was like the doorway didn't lead anywhere anymore. I took a step back immediately, pulling the door shut hard. The sound echoed through the hallway louder than it should have. We both stood there, staring at it. No one spoke, because we didn't need to. That was exactly what it meant. You can't leave the same way. Callum ran a hand over his face. No, that's not possible. I know, I said, but I didn't try the handle again, because I already knew it wouldn't change. Back door, Callum said quickly. Kitchen, we go that way. Yeah, I replied. We moved fast now, not running, but close. Every instinct screaming at us to get out, to move, to not stay still any longer than we had to. The hallway felt longer again, or maybe we were just noticing it more now. The corners didn't seem to sit where they should. The walls felt slightly misaligned, like the house had shifted just enough to throw everything off. We reached the kitchen. The back door stood closed. Normal, solid, real. Callum didn't hesitate. He grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Cold air rushed in. Actual cold. Actual outside. We both felt it. Go, he said. I stepped through first. Gravel underfoot. Fence to the left. Garden gate ahead. Normal. I turned back toward him. Come on. He stepped out, and the moment both of us were outside, the door slammed shut behind us. Hard. Violent. Neither of us had touched it. We both spun round instinctively. The kitchen window beside the door reflected us faintly, and for a second, I thought I saw something else in that reflection. Standing inside, right behind where we'd just been. Gone as soon as I focused on it. Did you? Callum started. Yeah, I said. We didn't go back. Didn't even consider it. We moved straight through the garden, out onto the narrow path and onto the road. And for the first time since we'd arrived, the air felt normal again. Not heavy, not wrong, just cold night air. We both stopped at the edge of the pavement, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. That wasn't just in there, Callum said quietly. No, I replied, because the front door, I know, that was the part that stuck. Not just the voice, not just the shape, but the way the house had changed, the way it had blocked one way out and left another, like it had decided how we were allowed to leave. Callum looked back at the house. All the lights were off now, every single one, even the ones we'd left on upstairs. The place sat there in complete darkness, windows like empty gaps in the walls. You think it's gone? He asked. I didn't answer straight away because I didn't believe that. Not really. And then, from inside the house, through the walls, through the glass, we heard it again. Clear, louder than before, not just for him, for both of us. You shouldn't have come back. The words landed heavy, different from before. Not a lure, not a command, something else, something closer to anger. Callum stepped back slightly. "It followed us," he said. "No," I replied slowly. "Then what is it?" I stared at the house, at the dark windows, at the shape of it sitting there, still and silent again, and something clicked. Not fully, not enough to understand it completely, but enough. "It didn't follow us," I said. Callum frowned. "Then what?" "It was already here." He went quiet, made more sense, more than anything else we'd said so far. The lodge, the voice, the way it learned, the way it changed. It wasn't tied to just one place, or maybe it didn't need to be. Callum shook his head slowly. No, that's worse." "Yeah," I said, because it was. Because that meant there wasn't a place we could just leave behind. And then, from somewhere behind us, on the road, a voice, soft, close, familiar. "Callum?" We both froze, turned slowly. There was nothing there. Empty road, silent. But the sound had been right beside us. Not in the house, Reed, not in the distance. Here, with us. Callum's face drained of color. "It's not staying in one place." "No," I said quietly, "it's not." And then it spoke again, clear, calm, right between us. "You still haven't listened." The cold that ran through me then was worse than anything before, because now it wasn't just calling, it wasn't just watching, it was correcting us, like we were still doing something wrong. And whatever that was, we hadn't figured it out yet. Neither of us moved after that. Not forward, not back. Just stood there in the road, the house behind us, the empty stretch ahead, and that voice somewhere in between, like it didn't need a direction anymore. "You still haven't listened." It echoed slightly in my head. Not loud, just persistent. Callum turned slowly in a full circle, like he was trying to catch it in motion. "Where is it?" he said, his voice tight, strained. "Where is it coming from?" "I don't think it works like that," I said, because that was becoming obvious now. It wasn't in a place, it was using places. The lodge, the house, the car. Now the road, like it was slipping between them, or maybe stretching through them. Callum shook his head, backing away slightly from the house. "We need to go, properly go. Get away from here." "Yeah," I said, but I didn't move straight away, because something about what it said, "You still haven't listened," that stuck. "What if we're missing something?" I said. Callum looked at me like I just suggested going back inside. "Missing what? We just got out. That's enough." "I know," but I hesitated, trying to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. "It's not just trying to get you to follow it anymore. It's reacting, like it's correcting us when we do something wrong." "Wrong?" he snapped. "We're trying to leave. How is that wrong?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it keeps saying it like we've already been told something." Callum went quiet for a second. Then slowly, "The warning." I nodded. "Don't answer her when she is close." We both looked at each other. Neither of us had answered. Not directly. "But we've been talking about it," Callum said. "Yeah. And reacting every time it speaks." "Yeah." Another pause, because that changed things. Not in a comforting way, but in a clearer one. "It doesn't want a conversation," I said slowly. "It wants a response." Callum swallowed. "So we just ignore it?" "Completely," I said. "No reacting, no answering, nothing." He nodded once. "Right." The voice didn't come again, not immediately, which felt deliberate, like it was listening to us. We both turned away from the house at the same time and started walking down the road. Not running, not rushing, just steady, controlled movement. No talking, no reacting, just walking. The road stretched ahead of us, dimly lit by the occasional streetlight further down. Everything looked normal again, quiet, still, just a typical empty street at night. For a few seconds, it almost worked. That illusion, that sense that maybe we'd figured it out. Then the smell hit, faint at first, then stronger. Burnt wood, old smoke. I stopped without meaning to. Callum did the same. We didn't speak, didn't need to, because we both smelled it, and we both knew that wasn't normal. The wind shifted slightly, carrying it stronger now, thick, heavy, like it was coming from somewhere close. As Callum turned his head slowly back toward the house, I didn't want to, but I did anyway. The windows, they weren't dark anymore. There was something inside, not light, not fire, but a glow, faint, orange, flickering like embers. My chest tightened. "That's not real. No," Callum said quietly. "It can't be." But it was, because as we watched, the glow spread, not quickly, not like flames, just slowly filling the rooms, bleeding through the windows like something waking up inside. And then, the sound, soft at first, then building, crackling, wood shifting, breaking, the unmistakable sound of fire. Callum stepped back instinctively. No, that's not happening. But it was. The house didn't burst into flames, didn't ignite like a normal fire. It just remembered. That's the only way I can describe it. Like something from the past was being played out again. The glow deepened. The sound grew louder, and then through the window, a shape, inside, moving, not like before. Not the same shadow we'd seen at the end of the hall. This was different, more defined, more human, but wrong in its own way because it didn't react to the fire, didn't try to escape it. It just stood there, still, as everything around it burned. Callum's voice dropped to a whisper. Is that... I don't know, I said quickly, because I didn't want to guess, didn't want to put meaning to it. But something about it felt like a memory, not an event happening now. Something that had already happened, something being shown. The voice came again, from the house, from the fire, from everywhere at once. Not quiet this time, not soft, clear. You didn't listen then either. The words hit differently, heavier, not directed at just us, at something else, something in the past. Callum shook his head slowly. That's not about us. No, I said, it's not. And suddenly, the message on the floorboards made sense. The warning, the repetition. Don't answer her when she is close. Not a general warning, a specific one. Something that had already gone wrong before. Something that someone had tried to stop. What I didn't expect was, I said under my breath, the thought forming too quickly to stop. What? Callum asked. I stared at the burning house, at the shape inside it, at the way it stood there, still, waiting. It's not trying to get you to follow it, I said slowly. Callum frowned. It's trying to get you to do what someone else did. He went still, because that made everything worse. The voice again, sharper now, closer. You answered. Callum's breath caught. I didn't, he said immediately. But his voice shook, because we both knew he had, not properly, not out loud, but he'd reacted, moved, stepped toward it, listened, and maybe that was enough. The glow inside the house flickered violently. The shape shifted, not stepping, not walking, just turning toward us. And for the first time, I saw its face, not clearly, not fully, but enough to know it wasn't right. The features didn't sit properly, like they'd been assembled from memory, from fragments, almost human, but not quite. Callum stumbled back a step. No, don't look, I said quickly, but it was too late, because now, it wasn't just showing us something, it was involving us, pulling us into whatever this was. And the worst part, it wasn't random, it had a pattern, a history, a reason, and we were stepping into it, without even realizing. Don't look at it, I said again, sharper this time. But Callum didn't answer. He couldn't, because he was still staring, locked onto whatever that thing in the house had just shown us. And I could see it happening again. That same pull, that same subtle shift in him, like something was lining him up with it. Callum, I snapped, grabbing his arm. Look at me. He blinked, just once, then again, and whatever hold had started to take him cracked slightly. That, he said, his voice strained. That's not right. That's not a person. I know, I said, and we're not staying here to figure it out, because something had changed again. Before, it had been testing, watching. Now, it was showing us things, trying to make us understand something we didn't want to understand. And the longer we stood there, the worse it was getting. The glow inside the house flared again, brighter this time, spilling through the windows like something building behind the walls. The sound of burning wood deepened, louder now, more violent, but still wrong. Not quite real, not quite present, like it was happening somewhere else, and we were just seeing it. The voice came again, closer, right beside us. You stayed. I felt it more than heard it. That shift in the air, that presence, like something had stepped into the space between us. Don't respond, I said immediately. Callum nodded quickly, but I could tell he was struggling now. His breathing had gone uneven again, his focus slipping between the house and the road like he didn't know where to anchor himself. We're going, I said. Now. No hesitation this time, no second guessing. We turned and started moving down the road. Faster now, not quite running, but close enough. Gravel crunched underfoot, the sound too loud, too sharp in the silence. The smell of smoke followed us. That was the worst part, because it shouldn't have. If it was just a memory, if it wasn't real, then it shouldn't have been able to follow. But it did. Faint at first, then stronger, like something was carrying it with us. Callum glanced back once. Don't, I said immediately. Don't look. He didn't argue, but I knew he'd seen something. I could tell from the way his pace changed slightly, like he wanted to move faster without admitting why. The road stretched ahead of us, dimly lit by a few distant lamps. Normal, solid, real, or at least it should have been, because after a minute, something felt off again. I slowed slightly, frowning. This isn't right. What? Callum asked, his voice tight. We should have hit the main road by now. He looked ahead, then around, and I saw it land, because he realized it too. The road hadn't changed, not really. Same bends, same fences, same stretch of uneven gravel, but it felt longer, like we'd been walking the same section twice. Keep going, he said quickly. Yeah. We picked up the pace again, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse, because now there was something else, a sound, not behind us, not ahead, all around. Soft, faint, like movement in the grass on both sides of the road, keeping pace with us. Do you hear that? Callum whispered. Yeah, I said. Because I did, and I didn't want to. We didn't look, didn't react, just kept walking. Step after step, faster now. The sound kept up, matching us, never getting closer, never falling behind, just there. And then, the voice again. Not from the house this time, not from behind, from the road ahead, clear, waiting. You're going the wrong way. We both stopped, not because we wanted to, because our bodies reacted before we could stop them. Don't, I said immediately. Ignore it. Callum nodded, but his eyes flicked forward anyway. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop, because the road ahead wasn't the same anymore. The lamps were gone, the fences looked different, lower, older, the ground darker, softer. Turn around, I said. We did, immediately. But behind us, the same wrong road, same unfamiliar stretch, same sense that we weren't where we were supposed to be. No, Callum said, his voice rising slightly. No, that's not. This is the same road. It's not, I said, because it wasn't, not anymore. The voice came again, calm, certain. You can't leave that way. I clenched my jaw. We're not listening. But it was getting harder, because now it wasn't just following. It wasn't just speaking. It was changing things. The road, the distance, the direction. Callum took a step back, then another. We're not going anywhere, he said. Not like this, I replied. Because suddenly, the warning made sense in a different way. You can't leave the same way. Not just the house, everything. The lodge, the path, the road. It wasn't letting us move normally anymore. It was rearranging. Callum ran a hand through his hair, panic starting to creep in properly now. So what do? I didn't answer straight away, because I didn't know, because everything we tried had made it worse. And then the voice again, closer, sharper. You're still doing it. That stopped me cold, because that sounded like frustration, like we were failing something, missing something obvious. Doing what? Callum snapped, his voice breaking slightly. Don't answer it, I said immediately, but it was too late. The moment he spoke, the air shifted, heavy, thick, like before. The sound in the grass stopped, completely. The road went silent again, and for a second, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere very close, right beside us, a whisper, not calm this time, not patient, angry. You don't listen. I grabbed Callum's arm hard. We move, now, no talking, no reacting. He nodded quickly, and this time, we ran. No hesitation, no looking back, just straight ahead, even though we didn't know where ahead was anymore. The ground underfoot felt wrong, softer, uneven, like it wasn't road anymore. But we didn't stop, couldn't, because something had changed again. The patience was gone, and whatever this was starting to lose it. And that was worse than anything we'd seen so far. I don't know how long we ran. It didn't feel like distance anymore, just movement. Blind, desperate movement. Like if we stopped for even a second, whatever was behind us, around us, inside whatever space we were in, would catch up properly. At some point, the ground changed. I didn't notice it straight away, just that my footing felt harder, more stable. The softness underfoot disappeared. The air shifted slightly too, not lighter exactly, but less dense. Callum slowed first, not by choice, more like his body just gave out. He stumbled, caught himself, then bent forward with his hands on his knees, breathing hard. I can't, he tried but couldn't finish. I stopped too, turned, listened, nothing, no movement, no voice, no pressure, just normal night air. I straightened slowly, my chest still tight, ears ringing slightly from how hard my heart was pounding. You hear anything? Callum shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. No, neither did I. And that alone, That silence felt different because it wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't watching. It wasn't waiting. It was just quiet, proper quiet. I turned slowly, taking in our surroundings properly for the first time. We weren't on the road anymore, not the one we'd been walking. We were standing near a low stone wall, the kind you see all over the moors, uneven and weather-worn. Beyond it, a narrow lane stretched off between dark hedgerows, and ahead, lights, but real. Village, Callum said, straightening slightly. Yeah, I replied. We didn't question it, didn't try to work out how we got there. We just moved toward it. Slow at first, then faster. Not running this time, but close enough. The closer we got, the more normal everything felt. The shape of houses, the glow of windows, the distant hum of something electrical. Small, ordinary things that grounded you again. By the time we reached the first row of cottages, the feeling had mostly gone. Not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe properly again. We didn't stop until we reached the pub. Same one as earlier. Still open, lights on, voices inside, real. We pushed the door open and stepped in, both of us looking worse than we probably realized, mud on our boots, faces pale, breathing still uneven. The conversation inside stopped almost immediately. Every head turned, and I saw it again. That same look from earlier, but stronger this time. Not curiosity, not irritation, recognition. The woman behind the bar stared at us for a second, then said very calmly, "You went up there." It wasn't a question. Callum didn't answer straight away. Neither did I, because suddenly, everything felt heavier again. Not the same way as before, but serious. Like we'd crossed into something we didn't understand. "We need to talk to someone," I said finally. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once. "Sit." We did. No argument, no hesitation. The man from earlier, the one by the window, was still there. He hadn't moved much, but now he was watching us properly, his expression darker than before. "You didn't stay quiet, did you?" he said. Callum shook his head slowly. "We tried." "Tried isn't the same," the man replied. The room stayed silent. No one else spoke, like they were waiting, like they already knew how this would go. "What is it?" I asked. Not aggressively, just needing something. An explanation, anything. The man leaned back slightly, studying us. "You went to the lodge, you heard her," Callum swallowed. "Yeah," and she answered back. That made my chest tighten, because that was exactly how it felt. Not like we discovered something, like something had responded. "She followed us," Callum said. The man shook his head slowly. "No, that's not how it works." "That's what he said," I added, nodding toward Callum. "Then you're both wrong," the man replied. "It doesn't follow, it doesn't chase, it doesn't leave." I frowned. "Then how?" "It uses what's there," he interrupted. "Places, voices, people." That landed harder than anything else, because it matched. Everything we'd seen, everything we'd heard, the way it changed, the way it adapted. The woman behind the bar spoke then quieter. "It started with the fire." I looked at her. "What fire?" She hesitated. "Then, that house wasn't abandoned the first time. Family lived there. Years ago, something happened, no one agrees what, but the place burned. Not all of it, just enough. The woman," the man added. "She didn't leave." Callum frowned. "She died?" Another pause. Then the woman said, "Maybe." That wasn't comforting, at all. "What do you mean, maybe?" I asked. She looked at me, her expression steady but distant. "People who were there said she was heard after, calling out, asking for help. Sounded right, sounded familiar, like someone you trusted." My stomach dropped slightly, because that was exactly it. "That's how it gets you," the man said. "You answer, you react, you step toward it, you give it something to work with. And if you don't," Callum asked. The man didn't answer straight away. "Then it tries something else." That silence that followed felt different, heavier, because now we weren't guessing anymore, we were understanding, and that made it worse. "People didn't listen," the woman said quietly. "That's the problem. They thought they knew what they were hearing, thought they could help, thought it was real." "And it wasn't," I said. She shook her head slowly. "Not in the way they thought." Callum leaned forward slightly. "What happens if you keep answering it?" The man looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You stop leaving." That was it. No elaboration, no explanation, just that. And somehow, that was enough. Because we'd already seen it. The way the road changed. The way the house shifted. The way space itself didn't behave properly anymore. "You get stuck," I said quietly. The man nodded once. "Not physically," he added. "Not at first." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest, because that meant there was more. Callum shook his head like he was trying to push it away. "But we got out. For now," the man said. That made both of us go still. The woman behind the bar stepped forward slightly. "Did it speak to both of you?" I nodded. Callum hesitated, then nodded too. Her expression tightened slightly. "That's not good." "No," the man agreed. "It usually picks one." Callum looked at me. "What does that mean?" "It means," the man said slowly, "it's not done." The room fell silent again, and for the first time since we left that house, I felt something worse than fear. Understanding. Because everything we'd experienced, the lodge, the voice, the fire, the house, the road, it wasn't random. It wasn't just haunting a place. It was continuing something. And now, we were part of it, whether we wanted to be or not. We didn't stay long after that. Not because anyone told us to leave. Not because something happened again. Just because there wasn't anything else to say. Once you understand something like that, even a small part of it, you don't sit around asking more questions. You don't push further. You don't try to make sense of every detail. You get out, and you hope it's enough. Callum didn't say much on the way back to his house. Neither did I. The road felt normal again. Properly normal. Cars passed us, streetlights worked, everything behaved the way it was supposed to. But neither of us relaxed. Not completely. Because once you've seen something like that, once you've felt it, normal stops meaning safe. We got back to his place just after midnight. The house looked exactly the same as when we'd left it. No glow, no smoke, no movement in the windows. Just a quiet, ordinary house on a quiet street. We stood outside for a moment before going in. "Together," Callum said. "Yeah." We stepped inside. Everything was still, exactly as we'd left it. The hallway light was on. The stairs were empty. No sound, no pressure, nothing. For a few seconds, I actually thought maybe that was it. Maybe we'd broken whatever it was by leaving the way we did. Maybe ignoring it, not answering, pulling away, maybe that had worked. Callum exhaled slowly. "Feels fine." "Yeah," I said, but I didn't mean it. Not fully. Because something about the air, even though it wasn't heavy, still felt watched. We checked the house properly this time. Every room, every corner, nothing. No signs of anything out of place. No movement, no sounds. By the time we were done, the tension had eased slightly. Not gone, but less immediate. "We're just rattled," Callum said, trying to convince both of us. "That's all it is." "Yeah," I replied. But I didn't argue, because I wanted that to be true. We stayed up for a while after that, sitting in the living room with the lights on, neither of us willing to go to sleep just yet. The conversation drifted in and out, half about what had happened, half about anything else we could think of just to avoid it. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with us. There's only so long you can stay on edge before your body gives in. Callum took the sofa. I stayed in the chair. We didn't turn the lights off. And at some point, we both fell asleep. I don't know how long I was out. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. But I woke up suddenly. No noise, no movement. Just awake fully. Like something had pulled me out of it. The room was exactly the same. Lights still on. Callum still on the sofa. Everything still. But something felt wrong. Subtle. Barely noticeable. But enough. I sat there listening. Nothing. Then a sound. Upstairs. Measured. A step. My chest tightened instantly. Because I knew that sound. I'd heard it before. In the lodge. In the hallway. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just sat there, gripping the arm of the chair, trying to keep my breathing steady. Another step. Slow. Deliberate. Callum stirred slightly on the sofa but didn't wake. I didn't say anything. Didn't call out. Didn't respond. Because now I understood. The warning. Don't answer her when she is close. And right then she was close. The steps stopped. Silence again. Then, from the top of the stairs, a voice. Soft, calm, clear. Not calling his name this time. Not testing. Not guessing. Just speaking. "You're learning." I felt something cold settle in my chest because that wasn't a threat. That wasn't a lure. That was approval. I didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even look toward the stairs. I just sat there, waiting. The silence stretched, long, uncomfortable. Then another sound, this time, closer, from the hallway, right outside the living room. A faint shift, like something had just stepped onto the carpet. I stared straight ahead, didn't blink, didn't turn. Because I knew if I looked, it would be there. And that would be enough. Enough for it to change again, to adapt, to get closer. The voice didn't come again, not straight away, but I could feel it. That presence, that awareness, right there, just outside, waiting, watching, seeing if I would break. Seconds passed, then minutes. I don't know how long I sat like that, but eventually the feeling eased, not gone, but stepped back, like something had retreated slightly, testing over. For now, I stayed awake until morning, didn't sleep again, didn't move much either, just sat there, listening, making sure. When the sun finally came up, everything looked normal again, completely, like none of it had happened. Callum woke up not long after, stretching, looking around. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. I didn't tell him, not straight away. I don't know why. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it worse, more real, or maybe because part of me already knew. This wasn't something we could fix. We didn't go back to Blackridge. Not once. Didn't talk about it much either. Not properly. But things changed after that. Small things. Subtle. Callum stopped going out at night on his own. Started leaving lights on more. Said he slept fine, but I noticed he'd wake up sometimes, just for a second, like he'd heard something. And me, I started paying attention to silence, properly paying attention. Because that's where it lives. Not in noise. Not in chaos, in quiet, in stillness. In that space where something can speak and wait for you to answer. Years went by. Life moved on. Normal things, work, people, routine. But every now and then, usually late at night, I'd hear something. Not clear, not obvious, just enough. A shift, a sound, a feeling. Like something had stepped just outside the edge of the room. And once, only once, I made the mistake of checking. It was years later. I was alone. Quiet house, no wind, no noise. Just that same stillness I'd learned to recognize. I heard it then, soft, right outside the front door, a voice familiar, too familiar, calling my name. Calm, patient, exactly the way it had sounded back then. And for a second, just a second, I almost answered. Almost. But I didn't because I remembered what it wanted, what it needed, and what would happen if I gave it that. So I stayed still, didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe properly. And after a while, it stopped. Just like before, quiet again, empty, like nothing had ever been there. But the difference now is I don't think it left. I think it's still there, still waiting, still learning, still trying. And the worst part is knowing that one day you might slip, you might react, you might answer without thinking. And when you do, that's when it gets closer. That's when it understands you. That's when you stop leaving. So if you ever hear something late at night, calling your name from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't answer. Not even to ask who's there. Not even to tell yourself it's nothing. Just stay still. Stay quiet and wait. Because whatever it is, it's listening, and it only needs you to respond once. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere waiting for you to find it.